Welcome to Rights and Remedies, the podcast where we explore the law, the fight for justice, and healing. I'm Allison Mahoney, your host and a lawyer dedicated to fighting for the rights of survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, as well as children harmed by the child welfare system. Each week, we delve into legal battles and court cases, share powerful stories that demand change, and spotlight the cutting-edge practices that are helping victims on their journey to healing. So, if you're ready to dive into the intersection of advocacy, subscribe to Rights and Remedies today. New episodes are released weekly, and we can't wait to have you join the conversation. Together, we can make a difference. Welcome back to Rights and Remedies. Before we begin today's episode, please be advised that we'll be discussing abusive relationships, which may be triggering for some listeners. If you need to take a break or skip this episode, please do so and prioritize your well-being as always. Today, we have Dr. Debi Silber here. She's the founder of the Post Betrayal Transformation Institute. She's a psychologist, an award-winning speaker and coach, and she studies trust, betrayal, forgiveness, and healing, among her many other accolades. Welcome so much to the podcast.
Thank you. Looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. So am I. So to start, can you tell us what is the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute?
Yeah, I'm in business 33 years, health, mindset, personal development. And then I had a really painful betrayal from my family. Thought I did what I needed to do to heal from that. And then it happened again a few years later. This time it was my husband. So that was the deal breaker. Got him out of the house. And here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, a business, and I needed to heal. But there wasn't a book, there wasn't a program. I couldn't really find anything to help me. So I enrolled in a PhD program to study betrayal at the PhD level. Really, I just wanted to heal and be okay for my kids and my clients.
Yeah.
I did a study while I was there. And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my family, my work, my life. And I'm happy to share what the discoveries were, but one of them was that there are these 5 stages we go through if we fully heal. Most people are stuck in stage 3. So I put the 5 stages in a program and it blew up. Then everyone wanted to work with me. I'm like, well, what do I do here? So I created our certification program so that coaches and healers and therapists and counselors can access this information. And then it struck me, I said, well, I did the research. I know what works. What would happen if I put everything the research proves works under one roof? That's the PBT Institute.
That is incredible. And talk about transforming a really painful or 2 painful and difficult experiences into something for the greater good. And that obviously also benefits you, but helps so many other people. So you provide one-on-one services, and then you also train people to help individuals as well, right? On top of speaking about these issues.
Yeah, within PBT, the PBT Institute, it's really everything the research proved works. So when someone comes in, first of all, and as I share the discoveries, but let's say the 5 stages, they know what stage they're in and everything. They're on a track. So let's say, they're in a stage 2, for example. They'll go to classes for stage 2. They'll see all of our coaches are certified in the 5 stages, but then they specialize in everything and anything having to do with healing from betrayal. So they'll see privately our coaches. They'll go to master classes with experts you can't get sessions with. They just love what we're doing and serve the community. They have access to our signature program, which literally moves them through the stages, and a very specific type of community that lifts and inspires, because the research proved you need support, but typically people find like some lame support group and you actually sabotage your healing because you're afraid to outgrow your people. So we need support, but we need the right kind. So everything in there is really designed to you access what state and self-assess, takes 2 seconds. And then you do everything you need to predictably move you through the 5 stages until you are transformed.
Fascinating. And I do want to talk about the 5 stages and what your research uncovered. Do you have a sense of how many people whose lives you've impacted at this point?
It's humbling. It's so hard to say because
Yeah.
within the PBT Institute, there's a number, but then, I mean, I have 7 books, the 2 podcasts, I mean, the podcast, which is top rated within the top 1.5% from betrayal to breakthrough, the 2 TEDx talks, both, I think both at this point have over 1 million views. At the blog, I mean, so I have no idea. Social media posts and things, I have no idea.
Okay, a lot.
And that's not even it. I mean, it's because here's the thing too. So many people have been betrayed. That doesn't necessarily mean they want to heal from it.
I see.
Really, our whole premise and our whole brand is around people who are ready to heal, which is a very different group than people who've been betrayed.
Being betrayed is a very painful thing.
Mhm.
Why would someone not want to heal, or is it that they're not ready to heal?
It's not intentional. They've actually, when I share the 5 stages, you'll see exactly where this shows up, but they've gotten so used to, let's say, surviving their experience, and they've been there for so long, that's become who they are. They can imagine a life without it. So what they've done is they've created a scenario where repeat betrayals happen, where they have symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome. That was the second discovery. And it becomes a really uncomfortable place to stay. So the thought of truly using the experience as a catalyst for transformation is not only foreign, but really gets a lot of people angry
Ah,
because they have to give up their story. They have to give up the whole victim thing. Oh, it's a lot.
and is part of that that they're being asked to take a leap into the unknown? Like they're attached to their victim story because that's what's comfortable and they don't know what's on the other side of it.
Exactly. It's comfortable and familiar, even if it stinks.
Okay.
So, it's the familiar known. And because that's where they mentally, emotionally live for so long, now not only is it just what's comfortable and familiar, they're hardwiring themselves to stay there. We have so many people who come into the PBT Institute also with therapy trauma. And listen,
Mhm.
I'm a psychologist, but I'm a coach first, the most well-meaning therapist. But if they're not highly skilled in betrayal, that person feels heard, validated, understood, but they are not an inch closer to moving towards that next stage. Because think about what that therapist is doing. They're giving support, right? Holding
Mhm.
space, which there's definitely a place for that. But when that's all that's happening, it's actually solidifying their spot in the hardest place to leave, stage 3. We see it with couples counseling too. If that counselor isn't well versed in the 5 stages in betrayal trauma, then
Yeah.
what happens is often, like, their intention is just to get the couple okay. But when you're truly healing from betrayal, it is a full-on reckoning. It's an incredible opportunity for both of them to crash and burn. The old no longer exists,
Mhm.
and because of that, they can create and birth something beautiful. But if let's say the betrayed, their experience is minimized, right, and the betrayer isn't understanding the profound impact of betrayal, nothing really happens.
Well, I imagine that could also do more harm than good.
It does.
It's not only being stuck, but also causing harm. I want to talk about your study. When you say betrayal, is
Mhm.
it what types of betrayal are we talking about? And then I'd love to hear what you studied and what you found.
Yeah. So just the definition, this is my definition. It's the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. And every relationship has these rules, but the way it works is the more we trust and the more we depend on someone, the deeper the betrayal. So
Mhm.
for example, a child who's totally dependent on their parent and then that parent does something awful, that's going to have a different impact than your coworker taking credit for your idea,
Right.
right? So originally, I was studying the betrayal of a family member, partner, or friend. And I actually had to drop the friend part because while friends will infuriate you, they don't break you. We're never broken, bent like family members or partners.
Okay.
Those are the ones. Yeah. So those are the ones that I studied. And uh, it's so shocking because this is why betrayal is a different type of trauma, because this was the person, or these were the people who we trusted the most, who gave us a sense of safety and security, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when this is the person, these are the people, to shatter that trust, to shatter that sense of safety and security, it's
Right.
traumatizing.
Right.
So the first discovery was that betrayal is in fact a different type of trauma. And people try to treat it like death of a loved one, or disease or whatever. If you're treating it the same, you'll notice you don't heal.
Hmm.
And that's because the difference is, like, let's say you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss, life will never be the
Right.
same. You don't necessarily question the relationship. You don't question your ability to trust. You don't question your
Yeah.
sanity. With betrayal, you do. So that betrayal is a different type of trauma. The healing needed its own name too. So I coined a new term, post-betrayal transformation. And that betrayal is a different type of trauma was the first discovery.
Okay. Which completely makes sense. I think people often say that getting divorced is like experiencing a death.
Mhm.
It's not. I got divorced and that never resonated with me when I
Yeah.
heard that. So
Mhm.
I appreciate what you just said. And is it the same for adults and for children when you're looking at betrayal?
It's different. If, like, let's say there's a child who's been, let's just say, some sort of abuse, right? If that's not cleaned up, then
Mhm.
what happens is that child goes into all kinds of adult relationships that have something similar to
Yeah.
it. Not because it's good, because it's familiar, right? So it's what they know. It's like, oh, I know how to do this. This feels like something I know. So the idea is, and also, and this is as part of the second discovery. Well, the second discovery was that there's this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal, it's known as post-betrayal syndrome. And, we've all heard time heals all wounds. I have the proof that when it comes to betrayal, that's not true.
Hmm.
Um, there's a question on the quiz that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? People write things like, I can, my betrayal happened 35 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm still unwilling to trust. It happened
Yeah.
10 years ago, feels like it happened yesterday. So we know that until and unless you intentionally and deliberately heal it, it will follow you around in your work, in your health, in your relationships.
Right. Which I think then makes people feel like there's an added layer of like something's wrong with me because that issue has stuck around for so long. Now, you mentioned that there's a collection of symptoms. What
Mhm.
are some of those symptoms that you see?
Yeah, sure. So we've had probably, I don't know, over 100,000 people take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. So now, and I'll share some, but as much as you'll hear the symptoms, listen to these numbers. Okay. So out of, let's say, 100,000 plus people, 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 94% deal with painful triggers. If you
Mm.
have, if you've
Yeah.
had a trigger, they take you right down. 80% are hyper vigilant. The most common physical symptoms: 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue. Your adrenals have crashed. You wake up in the morning, you're exhausted. 47% have weight changes. So in the beginning, maybe you can't hold any food down.
Yeah.
Later on, you're emotionally eating, you're using food for comfort. So common. 45% have a digestive issue. And that could be anything: Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, constipation, diarrhea, whatever. The most common mental symptoms: 78% are overwhelmed,
Mm.
68% can't focus, 62% can't concentrate. So imagine you can't concentrate, you're exhausted, you have a gut issue, you have to go to work every day. You have
Yeah.
to raise your kids, right? That's not even emotionally. So emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness. 83% are very angry. You can go
Oh,
back and forth between those two, how many times in an hour, right?
yeah.
Um, yeah, just a few more. 84, this one killed me. 84% have an inability to trust.
Mm.
So think about what an inability to trust would do in your work, in your relationships, right?
Right. Yeah.
67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they were afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
That is, I mean, those statistics are shocking and heartbreaking. And I'm so happy that an organization like yours exists to help address this.
The craziest part about it, well, first of all, those numbers are super high. But this the crazy part. They're also not necessarily from a recent betrayal.
Mm.
That's from the parent who did something awful when you were a kid. That's from the partner who broke your heart in high school. So think about this. That person may not know, care, remember. They may not even be alive. And here we are, decades later, with these symptoms because it's left unhealed. The good news is you can heal from all of it. That was the third discovery.
Are you or someone you love a victim of sexual assault, cybersexual abuse, domestic violence, or campus dating violence? At ALM Law, we're here to help you regain control and take action. With expertise in Colorado, Illinois, and New York, our compassionate attorneys understand the challenges you're facing. That's why we're offering a free 15-minute consultation to answer your questions and help you understand your options. Just mention this podcast, Rights and Remedies. Take the first step towards justice today. Call ALM Law at 970-315-5152 or visit us at almlawllc.com. You're not alone. Let us stand with you. Okay.
I'm happy to share how.
Yes, I would love to hear more about the third discovery, which seems like a discovery of hope.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
That was the most exciting thing. And that was where the 5 stages showed up. And not only did the 5 stages show up, but now we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at each stage. And we know what we need to do in order to move from one stage to the next. Healing is entirely predictable. So, I mean, yeah, and I'm happy to share the stages if you want to hear them.
I definitely want to hear the stages. These are the stages of healing, correct?
These are the 5 stages
Yes.
from betrayal to breakthrough. This is what the
Okay.
research proved. It's all we do within the PBT Institute. It's what all of our coaches are certified in. I'm going to give you a boiled down version.
Okay.
So stage 1 is before it happens. And if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with everybody, me too, was a heavy lean on the physical and mental thinking and doing. We're so good at that, right? And kind of neglecting or ignoring the emotional and the spiritual.
Okay.
But think about it. If a table only has 2 legs, it's easy for that table to topple over. That's us.
Right.
Stage 2, shock, trauma, D-Day, discovery day. This is the scariest of all of the stages. And this is when you get the news that forever changes your life. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview.
And so are you saying that in stage 1, that's before actually finding out about the betrayal, but what I'm getting is that we know in some way that something has gone awry
We've turned
before
on our
stage 2, where you
intuition.
discover. Is that right?
Yeah, you know how many people say, something didn't feel right.
Yeah.
We turn down our intuition. We're on autopilot. That's not saying if you're busy doing what you're doing, you're going to be betrayed. But there was a typical profile of somebody just blindsided because they were abiding by the rules of their relationship. And then they got busy with life, right? Which that's what we do.
Yeah.
So stage 2, there's the shock, there's the trauma. The bottom has bottomed out on you and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. So here's where we ignite the stress response. You're now headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in such a state of chaos and overwhelm. You're like, what? You cannot wrap your mind around this. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview, these are the rules. Trust this person. This is how life works, right? And in
Right.
one earth-shattering moment, every rule you've been holding to be real and true is no longer. So the bottom has bottomed out. But what would you do if that happened? You'd grab hold of anything or anyone in order to stay safe and stay
Hmm.
alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. This is the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this? Where do I go? Right? Who can I trust? This is the trap, though. Stage 3, by far, hands down, is the most common place we get stuck. And here's why.
Wow. Okay.
Once we've figured out how to survive our experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma where we just came from, we think it's good. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we don't know there's a stage 4 or stage 5. So we park here, we plant roots here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And 4 things start to happen. All of a sudden, you're going to start thinking about so many people as I
Yeah,
share
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the first thing is we start getting all those small self benefits. We get to be right. We get
Mhm.
someone to blame. We get sympathy from everyone we share our story with, right? We don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. Can I trust you? Should I trust you? I forget it. I'm not trusting anybody. So we plant
Yeah.
deeper roots. Again, we're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And now, because we're here longer than we should be, now the mind starts doing things like, maybe you're not that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So we plant deeper roots. Now, because these are the thoughts we're thinking, well, this is the energy we start putting out.
Hmm.
Like energy attracts like energy. So now we start attracting people and situations and relationships to confirm this is where we belong. Here's where we go to therapy, right?
Hmm.
And we just go over and go over and go over. Here's where we join that support group because we have our story and so does everybody else. Here's where we actually sabotage our healing because we're afraid to outgrow our betrayer, right? So it gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. We are so miserable here because it stinks, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go. Now, all we're doing is medicating or suppressing all those symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome because we're not healing anything. So what
Right.
do? We start numbing, avoiding, distracting. So we start using food, drugs, alcohol,
Yeah.
work, TV, whatever. So I can see someone, we do it for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, right? A year, 10 years. I can see someone 20 years later and say, that emotional eating or that drinking,
Mhm.
do you think that has anything to do with that betrayal? And they'd look at me like I'm crazy and they'd say, it happened 20 years ago. But do you see? All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there.
Yeah, yeah. I think part of what saddens me when I hear that is when people are going to support groups or
Mm-hmm.
to therapy, it's because they know something is not right
Yeah,
and they want to get better. But I imagine that it probably entrenches them even more in stage 3 when that doesn't happen. And it's like,
exactly.
this is just what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like
And think
what
about
else do
it.
you do?
Exactly. And if someone is talking about the same thing with their therapist for a year, 2, 5,
Mhm.
10, like what's happening? They could have moved through all 5 stages by then
Yeah.
easily. So, but they're not any closer to moving towards the next stage. What they're doing is just rooting themselves in stage 3. Because yes, they're feeling that heard, validated, understood, and they think, okay, well, eventually, if I do that enough, I'll feel better. No, because they're not an inch closer to stage 4. Does that make sense?
It does. So what
Yeah.
is stage 4 and how do people get there?
Yeah. So if you're willing to let go of the story, grieve, mourn the loss, a bunch of things you need to do, you move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So
Mhm.
here's where you acknowledge I can't undo what happened, but I control what I do with it. Right there in that decision, you're turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stop the massive damage you'd been creating in stages 2 and stage 3. Stage 4 feels like if you've ever moved, right? If you've
Mhm.
ever moved anywhere, house, condo, whatever, like, well, you don't take everything with you. You don't take the
Yeah.
things that don't represent the version of you want to be in this new space. Like, why would you? And it's so interesting because there's this one spot as people go from stage 3 to stage 4. If your friends weren't there for you, you're done. That lame support group, you're done. That betrayer who isn't changing, you're done. So people say all the
Huh.
time, what the heck? I've had these friends, all these years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. Right? And if they don't rise, they don't come along.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and and I'm forgetting the exact quote right now, but it's that you are the X many closest people
Yes.
to you. And
Mhm.
so it's important to surround yourself and spend your time with people who are lifting you up.
And that's exactly why we have support groups and things within the PBT Institute, but it's to lift and inspire. Because look at the example we just said. If you're healing and what's common in your support group is just complaining, in the beginning, you may sabotage your healing because you found your people. But once you start healing, you actually don't belong to that group anymore,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's why it's so common to stay stuck in stage 3, among other reasons. Anyway, once you've settled into stage 4, you've made it cozy, you've made it mentally home, you move into the 5th most beautiful stage, and this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal, self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. You didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now you do. The mind is healing. You're making all kinds of new rules, new boundaries
Yeah.
based on the you that you're becoming. And you have a whole new worldview based on everything you see so clearly now. And the 4 legs of that table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the spiritual and the emotional too. Those are the 5 stages.
Do people ever go back once they've been in like stage 4 or 5? Did they ever slip back into an earlier stage and then you have to address that or no?
You really outgrow an old stage and your BS meter becomes so sharp and so strong. So a few things you would sniff that out from a mile away. You're different. And
Mhm.
someone who is not an energetic match for the version of you you've become becomes very different. Like here, I'm going to show you something with my hands. You will never forget this. Ready? So here's what happens
Okay.
typically after betrayal. You're betrayed. It's terrible. It's horrible. Everybody's in so much pain. And they're like, oh, this is so bad. Let's just get back together. Or let me just have a new partner.
Mhm.
That's kind of similar. And nothing changes. And they do all of this. All we do within the PBT Institute is get them to stages 3, 4, 5. Now, if you're doing this, but you're so committed to this person, you're actually going to keep sabotaging yourself because you're scared. But then you're
I
like,
see.
but I like it here. Why don't they do this? Rise up. Well, they're not ready. So, right. So eventually, if
Uh-huh.
you're committed to doing this and they're not changing, eventually you get this,
I see. Okay.
right?
Okay.
So, and then eventually, you can do this. So the whole idea is you do the work to get to stage 5. Who knows if your partner or the people who betrayed you, or whatever, if they do the healing work, now you meet up again as 2 completely different people. See,
I
healing is
see.
always a choice, whether you rebuild yourself and move along. That's what I did with my family. It wasn't an option to rebuild with them. I
Hmm.
was doing this, right? Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something entirely new with the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. So not long ago, as 2 totally different people, we married each other again.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
I did this, he did this, we met up here.
And for those listening on audio, what she's doing is holding her hands out and having her fingertips touch. And when you rise up through the stages, your hand elevates. And so you're operating on a different plane from where you originally were and where that person who betrayed may remain if they don't do their own healing.
Exactly.
One last set of questions for you. You had mentioned before the interview that you also work with people who betray, who are doing the
Yeah.
betraying. Um, how do they come to you in the first place?
Yeah. Yeah. We have our most common programs are we have our reclaim program for the betrayed. We have our rebuild program for the betrayer. And it's so beautiful. I mean, listen, these the people who enter into this program, these are not like the sort of on to the next kind of betrayer. I mean, these are people who realize I just shattered the heart, the trust of the very person that I love the most, that loves me the most. Like they are so fed up with who they've been, and they're so ready to become someone they're proud of. So it's so interesting to watch. Like, for example, there was a couple, and in this scenario, certainly not in all, but he was the betrayer and she was the betrayed. So he was in our rebuild program, and I'm working with them, and he's working along with our coaches in the separate curriculum, and she's working in our reclaim program with coaches and curriculum and everything. And I remember giving him like a playbook. I'm like, say this and do this and don't say this and don't do that. Because as the betrayed, I know, I get, what the betrayed needs. And then I meet on a group call with the betrayed, and she's like, I just have to speak up. I can't believe it. He's better than the guy I met in high school. And I'm like, yes. So that's what happens.
That's incredible. And I think you had mentioned you also do work with couples. Is that right?
Yeah, this is a brand new program. So they're only eligible if they've been through the reclaim for the betrayed and rebuild for the betrayer, because we have seen, like I said, way too many times how couples counseling doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because it minimizes both experiences. So when both of them are willing to have their own reckoning and rebuild two versions of themselves, that is so different, so intentional, so deliberate, taking all the parts they love, leaving behind everything that no longer serves, then they're eligible for our program Renew, where we're talking about just bringing the fun back and the trust and all of these things. They've worked so hard to move past the betrayal, but what do you do now? Right? That's what Renew is all about.
Well, Dr. Silber, it seems like you are doing some phenomenal work, and I love how holistic your approach is. What's a message that you would give to someone who has recently experienced a significant betrayal? They are in the heart of stage 2. What's the first step that they should take?
Yeah, well, first of all, I've been there, and it is incredibly painful. But I would say this to yourself 1,000,000 times if you have to. And it's this: even though it happened to you, it's not about you. Don't personalize it, because it's not about you. This is the betrayer's issue. Now, the only part that's about you was, did you not speak up for yourself? Did you settle? Were you okay with not having your needs met? Did you not put boundaries in place? That's the part you want to look at, because when you are moving through the stages and you are intentionally rebuilding a version of you, you're cleaning all that up, because the stuff that no longer works doesn't come with you.
Beautiful. Thank you. And where can listeners find out more about your organization? How do they find you to work with you?
Yeah, everything is at the PBT, as in Post Betrayal Transformation, thepbtinstitute.com.
Thank you so much. And we'll include that in the show notes as well. Really, really appreciate your time and all of your insights. Thank you again for everything that you're doing.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us on Rights and Remedies. I hope today's episode gave you valuable insights into the legal issues facing victims and the pathways to healing. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Whether you're a survivor, an advocate, or someone looking to learn more, we're here to support and empower you. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. You can also follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at ALM Law LLC for updates, resources, and more. Until next time, take care and remember that together we can make a difference.